Hey folks, Zach Osterman here, I'm Insider Indianapolis Star. This is your Friday rundown for January 19th, 2024. Hope everybody's staying safe and warm. Hope the roads are clear wherever you are. We're all on an e-learning day and, just generally flying low to the ground in Bloomington. Got, I think, about 3.5 inches of snow last night, so nothing too bad. Just standard fare for the winter. Friday rundown, a little basketball talk and then a little housekeeping. If you haven't listened to Mind Your Banners, the latest Mind Your Banners podcast, Mike Nislek and I did one last night. I think went up first thing this morning, talking about kind of the fallout from Purdue. And I think we were both kind of in agreement that this feels like a moment, that at some level needs to involve some soul searching for Indiana, both because of the nature of the defeat, obviously, and also because of kind of where it leaves, Indiana. If you look at their schedule from here on, and this is KenPom, this isn't net, but KenPom and net, are two ranking systems that don't tend to be too far away from each other very often. Indiana's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 games out of 19, or 11 games out of 13, rather, left on its schedule against teams in the KenPom top 100. For the moment, anyway, Indiana has 4 wins against top 100 teams. Indiana has 1 win against a KenPom top 50 team. And if you look at kind of the back end of the schedule, Indiana, in its last 7 games, only plays 2 teams that are currently in the KenPom top 50. Both those games are at home. That's Wisconsin, which is number 12 right now on February 27th. That's Michigan State on March 10th in the season finale. Michigan State's 18th. So there's some quantity for Indiana, particularly some potential quad 2 wins in the latter part of this schedule, and particularly at home in Northwestern and Nebraska, on the road at Maryland, possibly, though Maryland isn't even in the top 100 in the net right now. They are one of the ones that differs a little bit between the net and the KenPom. But there's not a lot of quality. And that sort of, you put that side by side with the 6 games Indiana has upcoming, 4 of which are on the road, but all 4 of those games, at least as of right now, would be quad 1 wins. Wisconsin, Illinois, Ohio State, and Purdue. Indiana, the soul searching kind of has to come from losing by 21 points to your rival at home, and the nature of that defeat and just kind of everything that went wrong. The soul searching also has to come because Indiana's, rapidly running out of runway here to land the plane when it comes to building a quality NCAA tournament resume. And listen, I don't think you can necessarily look at this team and count on it to be able to go on the road and get, let's say, multiple, quality quad 1 type wins in the Big Ten right now. But the flip side is, if this team is going to prove itself NCAA tournament caliber, worthy of an NCAA tournament berth, that's probably at this point what it's going to have to do, at least in part. So it's going to have to start basically with trying to find a way. I think, maybe if Indiana could go 3-3 over its next 6, the other 2 in there's the 2 aways, Wisconsin and Illinois. There's an 8-day gap between those 2. Then they have Iowa and Penn State at home. Then Ohio State and Purdue on the road. If they go 3-3 in that stretch, they could at least maybe start to add some of those wins. If they could go 4-2, that would, I think, be a pretty dramatic improvement on their position, because you would presume, even in a sort of a worst case scenario, 4-2 would include sweeping those home games and then finding a way to win 2 of Wisconsin, Illinois, Ohio State, and Purdue on the road. And those would be quad 1 wins. Those would be quality road wins. Those would be road wins against, at this point anyway, likely NCAA tournament teams. But the point is, it's kind of one of those where I think there are a lot of people that just sort of say, I don't see this as an NCAA tournament caliber team. And I don't blame anybody who feels that way right now. The point I'm making here is this is maybe Indiana's last stretch to really prove it. It's hard to imagine Indiana going anything less than 3-3 in this stretch and not needing to maybe win all 7 of those games down the stretch, just to be in a position going into the Big Ten tournament where maybe it was in control of kind of its own destiny, its own fate. And that's just, some of that is the nature of the conference this year. There's a fair bit of quad 2, but not as much quad 1. The conference is a little bit down. Some of it's just the nature of what Indiana, frankly, hasn't done for itself. Again, Indiana has only one Ken Pom top 50 win right now. That's Ohio State at home, so that's a quad 2. It's going to take some fairly heavy lifting for Michigan on the road to become, based on the direction of Michigan's season, to become a quad 1 win again. If you're Indiana, you obviously didn't beat any of UConn, Auburn, or Kansas, so you can't hang that on the rack anywhere. The point is, it's kind of we are close to now or never time for Indiana. I think it is fair to say, beginning with tonight against Wisconsin in Madison. For reference, the Hoosiers are a 13-point underdog against Wisconsin. Ken Pom has Wisconsin 79, Indiana 66. Puts Indiana's chance of victory at 11%. So, that's kind of where, that's kind of where things stand. In that game, it's Indiana, not expected to win by any means. But again, it would be obviously a high-quality victory if they could get it. So Mike Nizick will be there for that tonight. I'll be following along from home. And then, again, Indiana will have an 8-day gap. And next week, we'll probably dig into a little bit more kind of football stuff. And I think, kind of moving to the housekeeping portion of this video, I think, talking about next week a little bit, there is going to be that 8-day gap. Probably move into some stuff starting to build towards spring football. Kurt Cignetti sat down with Don Fisher this week. I think it was this week, toward the beginning of this week, or maybe at the end of last week. Just kind of talk about a sort of a state of things as things have sort of settled down. A lot of Cignetti's coaches are out recruiting. His roster is in kind of the throes of off-season conditioning. And Cignetti said that actually Indiana's not going to start spring practice until the Thursday after spring break, which is March. Spring break is the 10th through the 17th this year, if you want to see it as sort of that Sunday to Sunday. So the Thursday after spring break would be March 21st. So Indiana's going to be condensing pretty much that whole stretch, that whole spring season. I think it's 12 practices, if I'm not mistaken, either 12 or 15. I can't remember. Down into a much shorter space of time. I think Cignetti said Indiana, basically the plan right now is Tuesday and Thursday they'll practice in the mornings. Saturday they'll practice around lunchtime or around noon, somewhere in that range. And that's kind of where things stand for IU football at the moment. I wouldn't expect, there won't really be any big roster movement for a little while because everybody started classes and, Indiana's not in a position to register new players. There's every chance Indiana adds one or two. We're still expecting Christian Peterson, the Carmel defensive back, to sign in the February window. Indiana could add one or two high school players in that window. I think they've been linked to a couple other 2024 kids. But the point is that the next big significant roster turn moment you'll see will be after everyone's spring practice, when players that have kind of maybe gone through the spring, maybe there was a coaching change, maybe they were young and they were kind of hoping for a bigger role, and they come out of spring and realize that maybe, the opportunity they thought was going to be there in the fall isn't going to be there for them for whatever reason, and they start looking for a new home. That will mean some players transfer out of Indiana. It will mean some Indiana takes some transfers from somewhere else. But it won't be nearly as dramatic as the kind of the stretch we saw Indiana go through around the turn of the year, where they brought in like 30 mid-year transfers, and that's still the busiest kind of transfer window, if you want to say. So another housekeeping, I think next week we'll have a story about just kind of the momentum that IU volleyball is building. Steve Aerts signed a new contract through 2029, which was announced earlier this month. Volleyball won 21 games last season, finished 6th in the Big Ten, first winning record in the Big Ten in a long time. Didn't make the NCAA tournament, but not very far off it, and returning, the likes of Cam Hayworth, Ramsey Gary. The next two recruiting classes have multiple, top 100 players. I think in 2025, Indiana has one of only 4 schools. I'm struggling to remember the other thing. I think Texas, maybe USC, and maybe Nebraska were the other 3. But Indiana is one of only 4 schools that, according to Prep Volleyball, has 2 players committed in the top 15. So there's just a lot of momentum around IU volleyball. The last 2 years in particular have really started kind of building up. And, I got a chance to talk to Aaron, and he said something really interesting. He said, just because we won a game last year doesn't mean we're going to win it this year or next year. So I think there's still a very sort of clear-eyed understanding within that program of the challenge of competing in the Big Ten, but it is building, and volleyball, which is obviously a sport that is very culturally relevant in the Midwest and is very competitive in the Big Ten, and only going to get more so because of the addition of Washington, UCLA, USC, Oregon. Washington's won national titles. USC, I think, has one. I want to say USC and Washington have each won one national title, and UCLA, I think, has four. The point is, the rich are only getting richer, which means the conference is only getting tougher. But Indiana has some real juice, some real momentum in that sport, and I think that it was beyond time, to be frank, for us to write about it. The other sport we'll check in on either next week or maybe the week after is women's soccer. Very similar, sort of structure. The last couple of years, Erwin van Bennekom has really kind of moved that program up a level competitively. Last season, they became exceptionally difficult to score on. I mean, they just like some really impressive runs of sort of scoreless soccer. And this year, they kind of married that to being able to just, start punching in, ones and twos and threes a game. And the result was their first NCAA tournament appearance in 10 years and their highest Big Ten points total, 20 points across an 8-game Big Ten season. They won 6, they drew 2, and they lost 2. You get 3 points for a win, 1 for a draw, none for a loss. They won 6, drew 2, lost 2 across a 10-game Big Ten season. That's the best points total an Indiana women's soccer team has ever built or has ever returned in one season. So a couple sports that, and the prompting of this is just like aired, Erwin van Bennekom signed a new contract through 2029 that was announced around the turn of the year. And so kind of checking in with two programs that have, a lot of real momentum, two programs that have struggled to find their footing historically in Indiana that are, kind of building some real momentum now. And it's also against the backdrop, and we'll close with this today, it's against the backdrop of Scott Dolson has been really focused since he took the job, and Fred Glass was before him. But I think it's been a particular priority for Dolson to get women's sports more competitive at Indiana. Softball, certainly more competitive. Again, women's soccer, volleyball, swimming and diving will always be really good. Women's basketball, we've chronicled, we've talked about the rise there. But of Indiana's 25 national championships, only one was in a women's sport. That was Lynn Loring's 1982 women's tennis team. So Scott Dolson really wants to sort of rectify some of that and redress, some of the competitive imbalance between his men's programs historically and his women's programs. And these are two sort of success stories so far. So we'll be highlighting those in the coming days and weeks. For now, we'll leave it there. For the Indianapolis Star, I'm Zach Osterman. This has been your Friday Rundown. Thanks so much for watching. Stay warm, stay safe. We'll talk to you soon.